want me on Facebook or I can't get.
Well, we are appear to be live, and we again had a few technical problems in getting there. But I'm Joe Roberts, and I'm your host for this Mayfield Friday time. We do not have our producer and technician with us, and don't have our co-host with us tonight. So I guess you're stuck with me again. Last week, our producer couldn't be here, and so my daughter April was with me. And although all of the production side and the technical side rests on my shoulders again tonight, but we do have the I think we do have the radio going, and so hopefully we've got everything there. Where stream time is going, and so let me look at the music and see if that's stopped. Okay. All right. Well, I think we are in control again, maybe. You'd think as many times as I've done this, I'd learned how to do it. But anyway, I do have my lovely wife with me this evening, and so she's my sidekick, has been for over 50 years.
Almost 50.
No,
80.
you count the time before we got married as...
No.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So anyway, she's been by my side through thick and thin, and so I asked her tonight, I said, hey, our co-host is not going to be able to be with us tonight. You want to go with me? After the surprised look on her face, she finally calmed down and said, yes, I will. So here we are. And we do have something a little different tonight. Usually I talk about some of the things that I have from Prophecy News Watch, and also from Liberty Council briefs, what have you. But tonight, instead of doing that, I do have some of those, however, that we do want to look at. But I wanted to bring tonight some of the news, alternative news, that I get throughout the week, and that does not always make the mainstream media, if you know what I mean. And so tonight I want to look at some of those things, and one of the articles from Prophecy News Watch is an article entitled "Criminal Charges for Expressing Biblical Views on Homosexuality." This was written by Jonathan Van Maren, Bridgehead, California. He says, back in May, I wrote a column on the ongoing persecution of Finnish politician, and forgive me if I butcher this name, Pavi Rasan, who has been consistently targeted over the past several years by LGBT activists for her outspoken advocacy on biblical sexual ethics. And so she has been interviewed by this gentleman that's writing the article, and he said that she has been interrogated by the Finnish police yet again, simply for articulating her Christian beliefs in public. Now, she is not an insignificant individual or figure in Finland. Let's see just a minute. Let me get... I hate to have dead air going here, but we're trying to okay, come out of that and go back into, we're trying to get our things monitored here so that we can, excuse me, we can tell if someone is texting us or on the Facebook and the YouTube. We didn't have time to get them up and going yet by that. Okay. See if you can get YouTube up on that one, if you would, please. Anyway, she is not a low-profile individual in Finland, simply because from 2004 to 2015, she served as chair for the Christian Democrats. Now, apparently that's their political party. And from June 2011 to May 2015, she was Minister for the Interior of Finland. Now, her husband is a Lutheran pastor, and apparently her Christian views are very well known in England. Well, there was a law change that came about in England, or in Finland rather, and the section on Finland's criminal code was changed and to include sexual orientation. And so then suddenly the expression of Orthodox Christian views held by countless millions could possibly be considered hate speech, and perhaps even prosecutable. And at least that's what her prosecutors are wanting. So she was interviewed again by this gentleman, and they spoke again on concerning her case. And the point that we're making this evening is that these things could happen in U.S. or Canada someday soon. To make a long story short on this, and I don't want to belabor this, the outcome of this case could be that if she is found guilty, the criminal code of Finland requires that the crime carries with it a sentence of a fine or imprisonment for a maximum of 2 years. Now understand, all that she has done is to express her belief in God, and also that she is not afraid to say that marriage is definitely between one man and one woman. That's what got her in trouble. So that's a continuing one. Hopefully we will be able to provide updates along the way as we go on that. Well, we still haven't gotten... Okay. All right. Well, we're having trouble getting the YouTube up that we monitor, and also Facebook that we also monitor. So I apologize for the delay of getting that. And let's see if I can get this up here. And let's see if we got everything going here, and they're not showing live on those. So anyway, we do apologize for that, but let's go on to what we have this evening. Our phone line is not working this evening, And also, our Skype is not online this evening, so we are sort of going in the blind, I guess you would say, this evening. No outside communication, apparently. So we'll have to check up those connections later to see what has happened with our feed into these two applications. So anyway, so apparently tonight we're not getting through on those, or at least we cannot bring them up to be monitored. So apologize for that. I'm going to have my wife to help me to read some of these news articles this evening, and maybe she will add her feminine view to it as we go along. The first one, we all are aware of, I'll let you read this one. We all are aware of what is happening in Louisville, Kentucky. And there is this the one about the church? Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. There is a Unitarian church in Louisville that opened its doors to the BLM rioters, etc. And they pretty soon regretted it. All right, sweetheart, will you read this article for us, please?
Okay, this is about the Louisville church that offers their sanctuary to the BLM militants, ending up beating up white people. Well, when a Louisville church attempted to offer themselves up as a sanctuary during the riots, no one ever could have predicted what would come of a seemingly harmless decision. The doors to the church were open. Since the building was considered exempt from the mayor's curfew orders, once the doors were open, mayhem ensued. The rioters were not about to let any churchgoers who may have been on hand have a moment of peace. They began to attack the building. Any members of the press or white people who happened to be on the premises were threatened with violence. A First Unitarian Church leader tried to explain the situation on a live stream. Viewers were told that the houses of worship are exempt from the curfew. Well, the church has opened this up as a sanctuary zone, they explained. If the rioters needed legal aid, they can receive it at the church. One of the rioters at the church went on an expletive-laden tirade, telling all of the white people who were present that they were going to be beaten up if they did not leave. The language was a bit more colorful than that, but we are sure that you get the point. White people have just been threatened with assault and kicked out of the church sanctuary grounds. Almost all the members of the press were demanded to leave as well, said the live streamer Brendan Gutenschwager. He took to Twitter to let people know what was going on at the church. It's just not safe at the moment, the man added. He definitely was not kidding one bit. The city established a 9 p.m. curfew so they could put a stop to the violence. 2 police officers were shot during the first night of the riots, setting an early tone for the tenor of the demonstrations. Louisville experiencing widespread chaos, and no one knows when all of this awfulness will cease. Americans who are not involved in the riots are starting to lose patience. Well, the church's heart was probably in the right place when they decided to open the doors, but they had no idea what element they were inviting inside. What happens if the police decide to surround the place and wait for these outlaws to come in outside? Any innocent people who happen to be inside could be placed in a very challenging position. That's what makes this story a very disturbing one. Any church that tries to help the rioters going forward should be referred to this story. The Unitarian Church does not live by any sort of Christian principle. They are merely there to function as a cult. No one buys into anything that is said in these churches, for the most part. Their attempt at becoming a shield to the rioters did not go as well as they may have hoped. Well, the thing is, churches are not supposed to function in this way. Helping out others is great, but a community needs a church that is willing to uphold the rule of law. The church decided that it was more important. Here's the thing. They decided it was more important for them to help out the rioters who are tearing their community to shreds. It makes no sense to anyone who has been paying attention to what's going on, but maybe this church's leadership can provide a reasonable explanation.
I doubt that.
Well, here's what they said. We're waiting to hear more about what took place in this church, and we hope that everyone is safe. The church should have been offered as a sanctuary for those who are not. Get that? Not rioting.
That's correct.
If the liberals are going to burn it all down, why don't they start here? They're the ones who were destroying churches anyway.
Yes. I just got a message that our YouTube channel is up and going, and also that the radio is going. Thank you, Foresight, for that. I wish you had some insight on Facebook, because we still can't get that one. So I'm not sure what has happened on that, but we'll see. I may go another route on that end of it, and so we'll see what happens there. And let's see if I can switch this around. And well, anyway.
Well, what I was thinking about with this, there's well-meaning people all around,
Right?
wanting to help, feeling bad for both sides.
That's right.
And sometimes those well-meaning people are the ones that are either killed, jailed, or beaten up, or all of these, or all of the above. And then it leads them to think, well, why should I have even bothered? And
Right. Yeah.
and look, this is what I got paid for doing this when I was trying to be, quote unquote, a good person. So sometimes knowing the law, knowing what you should do and should not do in these situations will help keep you from getting in trouble. And maybe this will help you understand what this was all about. And now this, where we are in Tennessee, Louisville is just not that far down the road, or up the road, I should say.
Yeah.
And so, things like that could happen anywhere. But yet, if you have not been keeping up with the news or keeping up with other things that are happening around, who would have thought that this would have happened? If you would have said that to me, I would have said, you're kidding, right?
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, they weren't kidding. This did happen. And people are, I would be dumbfounded. I just would be totally dumbfounded as to why they were taking this kind of an action.
I agree. Foresight, he's online here with us on YouTube. He says their hearts might be in the right place, but their brains are on leave. That's probably right. They wanted to do good, but maybe that's what they wanted to do, was to do good and to help out. But either one or two things, either their brain will on leave, like Foresight says, or they were deceived by BLM, or deceived by the political leaders, and thought they were doing okay. If they did listen to the Democratic leadership that's been fomenting all of these things around for all of these months, then they might indeed have been deceived. But I rather doubt it. The Unitarian Church is, well, all right, the definition of the word church is ecclesia, and it simply means a group of people that are gathered together. Ecclesia is the Greek term that's not used just for the New Testament church, but you find in the book of Acts that it was used in relation to a crowd getting together illegally. You remember, and I can't remember exactly the chapter now, but it was in the book of Acts where this assembly had come together, and the magistrate warned them that they were about to become illegal. But the word that's used there is ecclesia, which means an assembly. All right. So, according to the strict definition, Unitarians may be a gathered together assembly, but they're sure not a scriptural assembly, I can tell you that. In fact, the Unitarian Church has a history of being extremely liberal.
That's true.
And so it's not surprising that this is happening there with them. What's the next one we got there?
Okay. This is interesting going to be because it's liberal bullies. A veteran was brutally beat for MAGA hat. How is it that the Dems are allowed to bully the right, but the right cannot dare to bully them right back? It's a double standard that's becoming more and more obvious. As the country gets closer to the general election, the left is becoming increasingly less tolerant of the MAGA and everything that Trump stands for. We see that all the time.
Yes, we do.
So, thus saying that, here is a 77-year-old veteran in California who wore his hat proudly. He served his country. Trump has always stood his ground for veterans. There's no reason why this veteran would want to sport a Make America Great Again hat as he walked around. For he would not. Why wouldn't he want to do that?
Right.
The veteran, who was also wearing a thin blue line mask to show he supported law enforcement, was doing nothing wrong. He was simply enjoying himself. Mm-hmm. However, the intolerance has been growing. Danny Gomez Martinez, 26, has been arrested and charged with battery and abuse. He couldn't leave the veteran alone. He didn't like any of the gear that he was wearing, so he brutally assaulted him. Now, the question is this: how is this okay? The worst of it is that the Democrats have such a history of being violent toward the right, and that this kind of thing doesn't even make headlines. It's brushed under the rug. It is as if the media considers this to be innocent or acceptable. Now, the only way such a thing would make headlines is if this man was wearing a Biden-Harris hat and a BLM shirt, and the attacker was a member of the GOP. The double standard has become too much to bear. Now innocent, elderly veterans are becoming fodder for the political wars. So, they said, the military veteran who was attacked chose not to be named. He is recovering from his injuries, but was shaken by the event.
No doubt.
Because here he is, 77. He gave many years to be a veteran, and just because he was a veteran, and for what the things he was wearing, they took offense. So he said that the incident started when he was at the Red Bluff post office. A young man and woman walked by him. The woman said, "We just don't like people like you." So he shook it off and not being anything and commented that it breaks his heart. Then he said within seconds he was hit on the left side of the head. The man got him in a headlock and was pounding the veteran on the top of the head. The veteran recalls that there was blood everywhere. He didn't know where his hat or his package was. An ambulance was called. so that he could be treated for his head wounds. He said that it took him 3 days to overcome the headaches from the attack.
No doubt.
The veteran seems to be almost blaming himself. He said that he was a Vietnam veteran, spent 30 years in law enforcement. He explains that he's been taught situational awareness and never saw the attack coming. The last comment that he makes is what really sticks. I was so shocked for the hate that people have, you know. That's the problem. The hate that the left has is so significant that it takes people by surprise. The veteran had never met these people. He didn't hate them. He didn't even know them. Yet they would attack him simply because of his beliefs. This is what has to stop. There has to be tolerance between the two parties. We have to accept that the other party believes something different. We have to learn how to meet them in the middle and establish common ground. If we want to maintain democracy in the United States, the attacks of intolerance have to stop. The Democrats have to hold these attackers responsible for what they're doing. Otherwise, it's no longer a democracy. It's a dictatorship. The left will decide what we can say, what we can wear, what we can believe. Those who fight against it will be beaten into submission or killed. That's not the United States that is the home of the free and the land of the brave. Yet, that could be the United States if the Dems win the election.
Well, I tell you what, the way that things are shaping up right now in our country, if the Democrats somehow, and I'm just going to be frank in my speaking, not pulling any punches, if the Democrats somehow do get into office and then also take over the Senate, our country will no longer exist.
That's true.
I mean, it may in name only, but not as far as functioning goes. You know, sweetheart, when we were in Jamaica,
Right.
remember that one election that we went through?
Oh, yes.
I found myself caught in a various situation one night as I was driving home, way out in the mountains and what we call the Jamaican Alps. You know, we've been through there many times. One of those little remote villages was having a political rally. And the Jamaican politics has a long history of violence every time that there's an election that comes about.
Right.
And as I approached this village, I mean, the street was completely full of people, and there was music going on, and a little bit of music, and then there was a speaker, and I don't know what all else was going on, but I thought, oh boy, if they look inside the car and they see me as a white man, I'm finished. And but hey, the Lord was with me and protected me. I just eased my way through that crowd, and it just sort of parted in front of me, you know. I mean, I wasn't trying to be aggressive in the driving, and no one looked through the windshield. Praise the Lord. That would have been the only way they could have seen me, because the windows of the car were totally dark. And we did that because of the sun, not necessarily so that people couldn't see in, although that was a side benefit many times. But the Lord got me through that. But every time something like this happens, I'm reminded of the Jamaican politics and their elections. And it's typical, it seems. I may be wrong, but it seems to be a typical thing for a third world country to have much violence during their election times. And here we are in the election of 2020, we're no better, maybe even worse than a third world country in these days leading up to the election. What's going to happen if Trump wins, which I think that he will, but if Trump wins, we may have greater violence because of the left not accepting the election results. And I anticipate that this election will be highly contested if Trump wins, because the Democrats are not going to accept
That's true.
the vote.
That is true.
And so it's going to be dragged through the courts for a time. And all during that time, there's going to be greater violence, I think, than what we've seen now. Unless these idiotic Democrat leaders will take a stand and put the quietus on all of this violence and everything going on. And so it's, what I dread to see would be after Trump goes out after another 4 years, what is it going to be like then? Lord only knows. Hopefully the Lord will come back before that time.
That would be great.
Yes, it would. All right, Forsyth has some notes here. He said this is the literal definition of fascism. And he said, I take offense to Biden for president, but so what? This is America. They all have the right to be stupid. Yeah, that's right. Forsyth, I'm going to read everything you put on there, so if you don't want it on the air, don't print it, okay? But anyway, glad to have you on board with us this evening. What's the next article that we have?
Well, I was going through it and reading some of it while you were doing that and thinking, he's on my next part. Always. The next one is that Trump slams cowardly media for ignoring Biden's link to crime and corruption. Mm-hmm. Wasn't that part of what you were alluding to?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, the country wants to know why Hunter Biden is being left off the hook as it relates to his corruption findings. The media has mostly ignored the news about what has been found by two committees. The media would have demanded the resignation of Republicans had these findings been found true of a relative of President Trump. They surely would.
That's right.
The reluctance by the media to report on such findings is typical Democratic protection. They protect the liberals at all cost. But when a conservative is found with any dark secrets, the media immediately demands them to be prosecuted beyond the law's extent. Now, here's the thing. President Trump is not letting them get away with hiding Biden's involvement with his son's affairs. He has questioned the media about their silence on the issue. He wants to know why they have not looked into Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine and China and Russia. Mm-hmm. The president stated that if we had a media that was fair, I think it would be good if it would use the word equitable. If what's good for the one is good for the other. Equitable. Even just reasonable. This would be the biggest story for years and years. Then you would be entitled to a real Pulitzer Prizes, not the fake committee that gives away these fake rewards or awards, whichever. The media no longer reports on things worthy of prestigious rewards. Instead, they award themselves for making up the lack of their professionalism. Mm-hmm. In one story that came out from the New York Times, it was reported that the president had not paid taxes for the past 10 years. But the truth is that he has paid taxes every year, but he has been audited for the past, whichever one you want to use, 10 years. Mm-hmm. Just another example of their fake stories full of lies. Yeah. Biden's son continues to elude prosecution for his crimes. 2 different committees in the Senate have come out and said that Biden's son was performing work that was conflicting against the work of the Obama rule. And it was Joe Biden that was pushing for his son to get rich off the corruption of another nation. Hunter Biden is said to have cashed in using his father's name. But one can only wonder about the part that Joe Biden has had in his son's dealings. Daddy Biden used his influence to get his son on the board of Burisma so he could influence the country and make millions of dollars. Isn't that what they call inside trading or something of that sort?
Well, not necessarily insider trading is when
I realize what it is, but it's like, it's one of those similar things, people on the inside telling people on the outside who to do and where to go and where to get the money.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right. That sounds like similar things happening. So, with that being said, Biden's son has been blowing smoke ever since he resigned from the board of a gas company. He has remained in the shadows hoping that things will blow over and he can keep the money that he stole from the Ukrainian people. President Trump is calling it as he sees it. Hunter Biden has taken money from crucial leaders around the world. And while the Russian cooperation with the Democrats to try and discredit President Trump, it looks like Bidens are right in the middle of those issues as well. Hunter Biden has taken the money from a widow in Moscow whose husband had once been the mayor. Somehow he got that widow to pay him $3.5 million.
Yeah, Trump mentioned that during the debate, I believe.
Yes, he did. President Trump wants to know where the media is at since there is now a stable Russian connection to the Democratic Party's filth. The president's son posted, Hunter Biden received $3.5 million wire transfer from Elena Baturina, the billionaire widow of Yuri, I can't even say that one, Luzhkov. I'm not going to butcher it, I'm just going to spell it. The former mayor of Moscow, a known associate of Vladimir
Putin.
Putin, right, there we go. Where are our fearless journalists? Now that there's a real Russia connection, Trump Jr. tweeted. Later, the president chimed in and said that Joe Biden was in on the money. He's the only reason his son was able to get that kind of money out of a widow in another country. And like a good deny it all party, the Democrats are remaining silent on the entire issue.
Yeah.
But here's the crux of the matter. The issue of corruption surrounds Joe Biden and his criminal family. His actions as the vice president were questionable at best. He did things with Obama's knowledge that put normal people behind bars for life. These are the things that the president is trying to dig up about the frauds milking the country for every last cent they can get out of everyone. This almost sounds like things you see on TV and things you read in espionage stories and that you think, things like that really can't happen. This is made up. It's out of somebody's imagination, but
this
really,
is not.
No, this is really crazy.
Yes, it is.
Well, it's worse than crazy.
Yeah. Foresight says conflict of interest. You better believe it. If the Obama administration had not been so corrupt to begin with, if they would have been an honest administration, then these things that Joe Biden and Hunter have done would, it would have been scary for them,
Right.
because what comes to my mind, treason. When you cooperate with a foreign country to the detriment of your own, isn't that treason? Isn't that part of the definition of treason?
Right.
How long will people get away with all of this?
Well, here's the thing. If you had the money to do all this, you could cover it up and you could go on. But if you're a poor first person that does not have the money, no connections, they're going to exploit that.
Absolutely.
And that person is not going to get away with it. They're going to go to prison. They're going to end up dead. And then if he hasn't come forth with the money, then they're going to hound their family, hound everybody that knows them. Where is the money and where's the paper trail?
Right. Yes.
And like I said, it's going to become one of the stories that you see on TV.
Right.
That is awful.
Well, Forsyth says if this wasn't true, it wouldn't be believable.
Right.
And yeah, you're right. They were fearless because they had the MSM behind them. They had the deep state behind them, that's for sure. Otherwise, they would not have been able to get away with all this. Corruption in the political arena has been so bad. We are just now beginning to see just how bad it was. And is.
That's true. That's true. Well, the next article that you have for us is it takes a little turn, and I think it's a little bit of history of some of the things that you've been reading and coming up with.
I think there's an update in there too that we talked about
This
about
is what
the
next.
Northside Baptist Church out in Santa Clara, California.
This is another one, another church.
I think it's on farther in there, I believe.
You want me to find that one?
No, just go ahead.
Okay.
We've got time for this one, and then we might be pushing close on time.
Okay. All right. I will motor on.
Okay.
Okay. Let me see where I can find that one. I'm not finding that one.
it's-
Okay. All right. This is about the assault on Christians and your freedom, Matt Staver, Liberty Counsel. There's an open assault on people of faith in many parts of the country by governors who encourage rioters and protesters while restricting even criminally charging pastors, churches, and parishioners who gather for worship. Now, in California, for instance, these churches and pastors are now being held in contempt and fined for having worship services. All worship is banned for most of the state. California has gone off the deep end when it comes to attacks on churches. On July 6th, Governor Gavin Newsom banned singing and chanting. Then on July 13th, he banned all worship. And this includes Bible studies, fellowships, in private homes with anyone who does not live in the home. Violations of Governor Newsom's orders come with criminal charges up to 1 year in prison and daily fines of $1,000. These orders are now being forced against pastors, churches, and even parishioners. All the facts below and more are a matter of public record. So, with that being said, let's find out what's going on. Pastor John MacArthur of Grace Community Church is facing tens of thousands of dollars in fines by Los Angeles County, and this is just the beginning of the fines. The county also revoked his lease on a parking lot for the church that it had used for 45 years. Continued meetings would increase the fines, and Pastor MacArthur would go to jail. Pastor Chi Han, Harvest Rock Church, his staff, parishioners have been threatened with daily criminal charges, fines of $1,000 per day. Each criminal charge comes up to 1 year in prison. This threat was sent to our client in a letter from the Pasadena prosecutor. These criminal threats also apply to the church's home fellowship life groups. Our case is now at the Court of Appeals. Then, Pastor Rob McCoy of Godspeak Calvary Chapel was held in contempt, and the church is now being fined every time it meets. The next step would be jail for the pastor and the former mayor of Thousand Oaks, California. This is the same pastor who in 2018 consoled and prayed with the families of the victims at the mass shooting at the Borderline Bar and Grill. Pastor Jack Triber of North Valley Baptist Church has been fined $5,000 per service for singing. Now the church faces over $100,000 in fines. This church is one of the few counties where limited worship is permitted but no singing. The city sent spies to the church over the summer and then posted a letter to the church demanding it cease and desist, stating the church is unlawful. There are many more churches being attacked, and likely many more fines and criminal charges to come, not just for the brave pastors and congregants I've mentioned, but for the growing number of churches that have decided to take a stand against Governor Gavin Newsom's illegal and unconstitutional restrictions against religion. Now, here's the actual verifiable facts about his orders. Number one, on July 6th, Governor Newsom issued a worship guidance document which states unequivocally that places of worship must therefore discontinue singing and chanting activities and limit indoor attendance to 25% of building capacity or a minimum of 100 attendees. Remember, that's July 6th. Second, July 13th. He banned all worship for any county on the county monitoring list, which covers about 80% of the population. Now, this no worship ban includes private homes with anyone who does not live in the home. Excuse me. Well, no, that's July. August 31st, he issues his blueprint that even more clearly reveals his discrimination against churches and worship for the most of the state. In every one of his newly minted tiers, he gives preferential treatment to non-religious gatherings in museums, gyms, fitness centers, family entertainment centers, kite room, satellite wagering, laundromats, malls, destination centers, swap meets, and more. So his orders affect all churches and places of worship, even home Bible studies and fellowships. It's not even worse than no singing because all in person worship is banned, including home Bible studies, fellowship with anyone who does not live in the home. No, they're asking. Imagine this. It is criminal in California to go to your neighbor's home to pray with them or to have a Bible study. Can you imagine that? What it would be like? To various degrees, what I described in California is still happening in many states. The same governors who love abortion and encourage protesters to suppress the church and people of faith. Their agenda is obvious.
We live in America? Well, yes. But those things are not American.
No. No.
I tell you, things are going to get worse before they get better.
Yes.
And the reason they're going to get worse is because that I believe this will carry over into the end time events that are going to lead up to Jesus coming back again. All right, comments on this. Forsyth Pennington Jones says, I guess Governor Newsom doesn't want to be reelected. He's probably trying to set himself up as a dictator. And then Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people. That's one of the uh, Bill of Rights. And how can these governors who supposedly are or should be familiar with the laws of their state and the Constitution of the United States, how do they think they can get away with it? I don't know. That, again, that, to me, at least, that amounts to treason.
Well, you notice that what I found with all of these, they know these churches have money.
Yeah.
They know that they have land, they have property, they have assets, they have everything that could be sold that could get that money. So I could see where that they would say, okay, you can't pay that, then what do you have that you can pay it? If you have, like the one church has they had just redone all their buses, $500,000. Well,
That was the church out in Santa Clara, California.
right. So what would stop them from saying, well, since you can't pay your fines, give me your buses?
They could probably do that, or try. Well, here is the bottom line of all of this. All of these governors, and now there are 6 states that Matt Staver says that they have lawsuits against the governors. Colorado is the latest one. And California, Virginia, Illinois, Maine,
Kentucky.
and now Colorado. They are trying their best to shut down churches.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make any difference if they're a scriptural church or not.
No.
The fact that they are and identify as a church, then they're trying to shut them down.
Right.
And as Forsythe mentions here, he said they could place a lien against them. And this church out in California now, or this church in Santa Clara, California, already has over $100,000 in fines against it. And like Forsythe says, they can put a lien on that.
Right.
And you know that they're not going to be able to continue.
No.
So we can pretty well guess what the end result could be.
Well, what about the rest of the churches that are small, that don't have anything? You notice they're not going after them.
No.
Yet. Because they have no assets.
If they can succeed with these quote unquote mega churches,
Right.
then it won't be any problem whatsoever to go after small churches.
Right.
Because small churches will not have the resources and the capability to fight them.
No. They know that.
Yes, they know that. All these other churches that are being represented by Matt Staver and other law firms, these are churches that are large, and then they have quite a bit of assets, shall we say.
Right.
Excuse me. And I think that's the reason that they're not going after small churches, because they don't have that much. All these others, they've got a lot to lose.
Right.
But, well, we are out of time. And yes, I did want to, thank you, Forsythe, you reminded me. I did have a sheet that I was going to bring tonight, the qualifications of the Supreme Court nominee, Ms. Barrett. One great reason why that she must be approved for the Supreme Court before the election takes place is because, number one, the election results are going to be contested. That's a given. And it'll go all the way to the Supreme Court. With another conservative on the court, then conservatives have the ability to bring back a positive verdict. All right? And another thing, with this lady on the Supreme Court as a new justice, all of these cases that these law firms have that are battling for our rights, our freedom of speech, etc., they're going to be going to the Supreme Court. And with her on it, we can, I believe we can depend upon a ruling that is in harmony with the Constitution.
Right.
And without her being on the court, leaving only 8 justices, anything that comes to the Supreme Court and it winds up being a tie, 4-4, it's going to fall back on the lesser court from which the case came. And usually their ruling is not what we want, hence the reason for it being elevated to the Supreme Court.
Right.
So then a lower court's verdict or finding would be left standing. And many times that is very bad. All right, well, we've come to the end of our broadcast this evening, so glad to have all of you with us. We never know who is listening to us, but we appreciate the feedback from those of you who can communicate with us, and we appreciate your prayers and your support, and we just ask that you would pray for our country, because it's just we are in a situation in our country where that more than ever we need the prayers of God's people, and we need God's people to continue to stand true for the Word and for Him. Father, we thank you for all that you have done for us. We just ask, Father, that you would be with our country at this very trying time, that you would be with our president and those of our officials who are endeavoring to adhere to our Constitution and preserve our freedoms. We just ask, Father, that you would be with the prayer requests on our minds and our hearts. And we just thank you, Father, for loving us and caring for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well,
Amen.
We do, again, want to thank you for being aboard with us this evening. And for listening to us. And I'm trying to play our closing here, and it's not seeming to work. Isn't that the pitch? That's always the way it goes, one way or another. Well, anyway, we will say goodbye for now, and may God bless. I'm Joe Roberts.
I'm Angela Roberts.
And we say good night.
Good night.
We're off.